Yo, what's up, everyone? Spitty here. And as if any of you are on R21Freak lately, you know that we recently finished our eighth pad comp. Reviews have been a little sparse so far. Mostly just psychotic and a few from SM Max. So I'm gonna come in here and chime in with a quick countdown. I'm just gonna touch on some charts really quick. Just touch up on some things really quick because I don't really have the time to write out a full set of paragraphs for every chart, so I just want to get this done quickly. But it should be hopefully informative to everyone, enough to everyone who's been, asking, yo, why did I get ranked so low? What can I do to improve? That sort of stuff. So I'm just going to touch on some positives and negatives of every chart really quick. Going to try and spend less than a minute on each chart. But it should be enough to get everything done. So let's get started. From the bottom, we got Call Me Maybe. Oh yeah, keep in mind this ranking is based on my personal list, not the overall ranking. Okay, this file, I feel like the author tried to go for as varied of a file as possible, which I appreciate the thought, but the execution is massively flawed. You need to slow down your rhythms and check them out a little more closely, because a lot of the rhythms felt wrong. Things like the 48th flams here in this section to follow the vocals were totally unnecessary and just feel really forced. Overall, you need to have more of a cohesive feel for a chart. But I'm saying this, but you came in, and when you came in and said you pretty much tried to submit like the worst song possible, so I'm not even convinced that you really seriously tried with this file. So I'm not going to waste my breath any further. No offense, but I mean, you pretty much came out and said it yourself. Next up, we got Take My Hand. This is mostly an issue of just song choice not lending itself to a varied chart. Among some other flaws, like steps starting with the music are always frowned upon unless you have a damn good reason for it, and you do not in this case. The giant walls of stop gimmicks were, when they were the smaller stops, were completely unnoticeable and totally unnecessary, and when they were larger stops, were generally just kind of irritating. Patterning was acceptable, but kind of threw around candles randomly. These jumps down here, the 16th jumps, not fun at all. Overall, it's just you submit. Comp is about submitting a file that's going to wow the judges, and submitting a stream dump, a file that is like 50% stream dump, is not going to accomplish that at all. I feel like song choice was your biggest downfall here, because most of the other issues were pretty minor. Next up, we have Walls, which, speaking of poor song choice, this is another case of it. This song lends itself to nothing but 8th stream and jumps. The jump use in the beginning is very overdone, and has a lot of ambiguity, like right here, this up left followed by a down. So you need to watch for that. And as for 16ths, the 16th patterning is just kind of, there's candles thrown everywhere with no good reason. You kind of need to have a good reason. It's generally a good idea to have a reason for using candles, like a harsher sound in the melody you're following. But yeah, like this long quarter notes jump section, it's all really boring. Chart is just not interesting to play at all. I tell you, Miracle, rhythms need a lot of checks. There's a lot of 16ths that are just off the mark, just by a tiny bit. And the other issue that I had was just the kind of forced, just like throwing 8th. Because there's only 8th notes, you felt the need to throw crossovers everywhere wherever there weren't 16th notes. And it's just not really that fun. Try to limit your crossover use a little more. and yeah, do some more rhythm checks. Nightmare Night, another song choice issue, more so in the cut though. I think the issues with the song could be avoidable with the better cut, but the cut you have is extremely repetitive, and the chart gets really just, you know, samey really fast. The mine gimmick is really overdone and not necessary at all, and really distracts from the chart and forces some awkward movements. Other than that, this could have worked as a more Jack-themed chart. You know, Jacks aren't everyone's cup of tea, but your use of them for the most part made sense on some level. But it's the repetitiveness of the chart and the overbearing mine gimmick. Also, this section right here where you just abruptly cut out following more interesting melodies just for upbeats to follow the synths. That's really boring, it's really empty, it's really pointless. Parodies. Honestly, to be honest, I think part of me rating this so lowly was just that this is a very difficult song to have to listen to a million times in a row, but even so, I feel like a lot of the crossover use didn't really fit. There was a lot of rhythm use, a lot of rhythms following things that were barely audible. The chart just, as a whole, felt a lot harder than what it should have been for the song, personally. That's how I personally feel about it. And yeah, at this tempo, 160 BPM, 16th crossovers are actually pretty, you know, relatively tricky and should be used fairly carefully, and I felt like they were used a bit recklessly in cases. But yeah, interesting song, I'll definitely give you that. Firestarter, I just felt like this was the big culprit of this song was just that there was no cohesive theme or feel to the chart. You just kind of... It felt like you tried to throw in a bit of everything. Like, there's just crossovers that come in 16ths. I don't remember where exactly off the top of my head. Somewhere down here. They show up once and then never again. Things like that. There's also things like right here, you've got some jump ambiguity going on with a down left jump followed by an up arrow. It's not clear whether you should be hitting that with your left or right foot. You need to watch for that sort of stuff. Yeah. Overall, I'm just not really a huge fan of this. It just feels really haphazard in a lot of cases. And also, I would highly suggest against having sections where you just have eighth note streams with jumps following percussion. That makes it feel like a keyboard chart. That's really all I have to say about this. Give it a little bit more of a cohesive theme, and I think I'd like it a lot more. My Narco, you had a lot of potential here, but the 16th patterning is very dull, very boring. Just kind of, yeah, like this clumpy stuff with candles thrown in at random places. It kind of the streams feel like they were going for visual appeal more than actual like physical padding feel. You also had a lot of times where you just cut to following the vocals, was like really straightforward, boring quarter note rhythms when there were either more interesting good things going on in the melody, or I feel like just following eighth notes to follow the basic rhythms, like the rhythm sections, would have been much more appropriate. So yeah, I'd say in general, you should have tried to follow the 16th melodies a little more consistently, rather than cutting to these quarter note vocals so frequently. I think it would have led for a more interesting chart. Your Own Miracle. Once again, notes starting with the music. Not a fan. There's a random ass teal note down here, which I can only assume was an accidental input. other than that, it's just not an interesting chart to me. There's a lot of like syncopated 16th rhythms, and you instead chose to just write a giant 16th stream. I don't find it interesting. I don't think it's anything. I don't think it's anything special, personally. The castle. The main issue here is just, you've got a lot of the right ideas as far as patterning goes, but your rhythm interpretation is way off. Well, not even, I wouldn't even say way off. It's like just barely missing the mark, as in like, here, hold on, it's like, right here, I have that 16.5, I don't think that step should be there. I don't think that step should be there. I don't think that step should be there. So like, because I think that follows the cymbal crashes better. Maybe if you had jumps like this instead, it would accent the cymbals better and fit with the percussion you were following better. Let's see, what else do I have? 20 point, like, your 16th rhythms in a lot of cases need tweaking. Removing that note, and then adding one like here. Obviously you need to change the patterning appropriately, but repeat that, same thing for similar sections. Down here, 54.75 should I have as unnecessary. I felt a note was needed here. Yeah, I can do this. I could do this for the entire chart, but I don't want to. I need to, you know, I don't want to focus so much on exclusively one chart. Overall, I'd say just slow down the rate mod and, you know, get a better listen to those rhythms. Because I think with appropriate rhythm interpretations, that would have actually been a relatively solid entry. Critical Crystal is a real damn shame. This chart would have been at least like middle ground material on the overall rankings, but you've implemented these BPM gimmicks incorrectly, and it makes it so that by the end of the song you've gone from an acceptable syncing, like an acceptable attack window, to hitting on beat your landing borderline decent great window, and that quite frankly is unplayable. The only other critique I have at the moment is that this section down here I feel could have used a lot less kind of copy-paste mirror feel going on. I get that it's a repeating line in the music, but this just got really repetitive really fast, and like, wouldn't have killed you to use an up hold or down hold or something for one of the iterations. Would have broken the monotony a bit. Shakunetsu Beachside Bunny. Honestly, I think it's just, most of what you have in here is technically correct, but it just feels really overlayered and really cluttery. The few points of note that I have down here, beat 93 right here, these 16ths, that feels kind of overstepped. Same for 105 right here. The 16th, or 30 seconds rather, starting right here, are probably not necessary, because there's actually a lot more in here than what you're stepping, and it just kind of feels weird to follow some of them but not some of the others, and I think it would fit better with the rest of the chart to just not have them anyway, possibly. Let's see. Measure 45. These hanging 16ths off of these 8th holds really don't feel necessary in this section. But yeah, overall, I think a simpler chart would have been a lot more enjoyable for this song. That's all I have for now. Broken, not a whole lot wrong here, but let's see, a few things though that kind of really killed it for me. Beat 92 through here, these really feels like you need 16s there to finish following the percussion line. This first slowdown, frankly, feels really unnecessary, and I don't like the sudden change on the last hit that you can't bracket it with 1 foot. It just kind of comes out of nowhere and doesn't really feel like it fits. Let's see. I don't really like like, the eighth note stream is okay, but I feel like the mini holds following the vocals just makes it feel kind of cluttery. Excuse me. And then lastly, down here, it might have been a good idea to drop the rhythm simplification once the song's sped up and add the gallops here. That's personal taste, though, I suppose. Last thing I have is down here at my 64. Since the main thing you're following is the synth line, I feel like the sections here, like right here, I feel like this should be straight eighth notes. I understand you're following the piano, but this is exactly the same rhythm you're following up here when it's following the synth. So I think, for the sake of distinguishing it from the earlier section, that you should just stick with the eighth notes that were in the synth line. That's all I got for that. Let's see. Dive 2, Axel F. I've got actually very little to critique about this chart. The issue is more with your song choice. The song just feels really drifty, and like the instruments are not synced up right, and it makes the chart just kind of feel janky and weird to play. But that's entirely the fault of the musicians. But overall, it's mostly a pretty straightforward 9. It looks decently fun to play. The only thing I have to critique is I personally felt like beat 180 down here was a little, with the straight 16th run all the way through, was felt a little overstepped. But yeah, overall it's an alright chart. It just didn't really catch my interest as much as most of the stuff ranked above it. Won't You Kiss Me? This is a pretty similar case to Dive 2. There's very little actually wrong with the chart. It's just not interesting. It's, you know, straightforward 9 with a couple broken 16th gallops and streams. You know, you managed to avoid any major issues like double steps or such, so, you know, that's good enough in the case of most 9s. The only issue I really have, I'm not a fan of the intro mine art. I feel like that's kind of comes off as kind of tacky and unnecessary. You also should watch Jump Ambiguity, like right here at beat 88, and down here at beat 155.5. Exact same upright jump to down. It wouldn't kill you to, you know, change the down to a right or left or whatever you feel like doing, so that it's not ambiguous what step you should be hitting that with and leading to potential double stepping. Other than that, Sakura trick is shit, but that's beside the point. But yeah, overall, fun-looking 9, just not really interesting. I was a little harsh on this on my first impressions, but I think that was just because of my huge distaste for My Chemical Romance. Once I actually gave it a fair chance, there's actually a fair bit of clever little things going on in here. I like the use of a lot of the crossovers in the early 8th notes. You know, I liked like these little double steps towards the ends of the chorus lines that kind of, you know, went with the vocals and accented the like the heavier percussion hits in a way. But overall, some of the jump usage was a little overdone, I felt. This 16th run was a giant difficulty spike. Although I guess I can be thankful that, you know, you kept the turning to a minimum and the candles to a minimum. Although there is one here, which I think should be taken out, because I really feel like to fit with the rest of the chart, this run should be very, you know, very simple patterning. This run really candle heavy, really sticks out from the rest of the chart, considering the, like, you know, the chorus is entirely 8th notes. Like a 2-measure run of 16th run of nothing but candles feels really out of place. I liked cutting out for like kind of the shout chorus with just the mines. But yeah, overall, considering the song, I think you did a good job with this. I'm just not a huge fan of the song or the chart, or necessarily the chart it lends itself to, but you did a good job for what you were working with. Overall, I'd just say maybe tone down the 8th note crossover using the choruses, because sometimes it felt a little haphazard. Next up, we got print temps. I feel like almost every one of these 16th bursts felt overstepped. They almost all sounded like they should have just been broken up bursts of 5/16 notes. My other major critique is these 16th notes cueing the double steps. They are very close to the step you are coming off of. I think it would have helped even to just move it down like a 30-second note like that would have helped. Because as it is, I feel like accidental mind triggers is going to be a huge issue. And that's kind of irritating to deal with. That's really all I have. I'd just break up the 16th note runs and move the mind cues. Overall, you've actually done a pretty solid job on this. Future music. Overall, a pretty solid entry here. Honestly, I think everything ranked like 20 and up overall in the comp list is actually really solid. Just a few nitpicks here. The synth line you're following for these opening and similarly at the closing jumps actually does shift a bit. It might be worth considering to move like these blue notes up to the 16th. I think that does follow the music better, but at the same time I can understand wanting the repetition. So that's, you know, totally your call. I'd say it's acceptable either way. Let's see. These 12th jacks aren't quite accurate. They would be better off as, you know, kind of pseudo triplets like that. You know, similar to, you know, the old blue-green-red or red-green-blue on the, you know, next subdivision up, but, you know, just shrunk down to the 30-second increments instead. I'm not sure, but that might be the same case here. The rhythm's kind of hard to hear, so I had a hard time making that call. It sounds like it's the same instrument, so I want to say it's probably the same rhythm, but it's a tough call. So, you know, that one's your call, but this rhythm is definitely more accurate like this. I'm not a huge fan of the 16th sweep here. I really don't hear 16ths, and I don't think it really fits well with the sound you're following. And I'm also not hearing the 24ths down here on beat 213. I really don't hear that in the music at all. But overall, this is a really solid, fun-looking, like low 11. So, yeah, definitely worth checking out for anyone who hasn't yet. Mulligan, this is one that I really, really, really wanted to like, but the more I looked at it, the more the biggest flaw in the chart started to offend me. I'll have more on that in a bit. The couple little things. The mine Q double step right here, that is not clear at all. The first time I played through it, I thought it was some sort of, you know, like mine hopping thing, a la like Go 60 Go or something, like combined with crossovers, something really weird like that. But then when it came into here, I was double stepping, and it's like, oh, I guess it was mine cues. This would have solved all of that. Just add a hold. It's, you know, gets the same message across much more clearly. And, you know, doesn't really sacrifice anything. Let's see. I think a lot of the longer 16th note runs, based on the melody they're following, would have fit better as, like, anchor or trill runs. I think that would have fit the music better. But the biggest issue this chart has that single-handedly caused me to bump it down, like, 7 ranks, is that measure 49 to 57 is a literal straight copy-paste of measure 24 to 32. That is incredibly lazy. There is zero excuse for that. You can do better than that. Don't do that. I can understand using copy-paste because it's the same, you know, it's a repetition of the same melody, but at least change up the patterns or something. I don't want to play the same part of the chart twice. It's a real shame that happened because I feel like this chart might have been top 10 for me if it weren't for that. So yeah, definitely fix up the copy-paste at least, and this chart will be so much better. The Door into Rainbow, this was another one that I was pretty disappointed by something towards the end. Because overall this is a really solid file. A lot of, you know, rhythmic variants, 24th trills, 16th runs, etc., etc. You know, a lot of cool stuff going on. The only minor critique I really have is that you may want to finish the 16th run here. I understand though that the bass kicks are coming in here and you're shifting to that. But considering they're just 8th notes, it might be worth putting 16ths to keep following the snares. It's up to you. My biggest issue is right here. You have an interesting 16th note melody, which is very clearly audible, and there you put a repeating 8th note staircase to the piano notes. It's really dull and boring. The chart just suddenly loses all of its interesting rhythmic variants when this happens. I can understand its use in the last iteration down here. There isn't a whole lot else, but I think the 8th note staircase hold should have been confined to this section, and you should have opted to follow the 16th synths in these two. But other than that, very well done. And the fact that this is ranked 17th, and that's, you know, I only have issues with like one section, is a testament to how solid the top half of this comp is. Number 16 is number 15, part 1 and 2, and honestly, this is the one file that I am slightly regretting where I ranked it. I feel like I really should have put this top 10. I think a lot of it was just my first impression of it was not particularly good because, you know, it's a very... The chart kind of comes off as a bit scatterbrained, but that's mainly the issue of the music. For what the music is, I'd definitely say it stepped very well. Only a few nitpicks. This roll, I do not like this roll at all. It just feels really weird having that roll while simultaneously jumping, I guess, to hit these. I think a hold would have worked just fine. I think you really should have marked the speed up with a mine, because it is not at all clear based on the step patterns present where the speed up is. So that's entirely up to memorization. And yeah, I think a mine or a mini hold or something would have really helped that. Beat 124 down here, these like full near 360 rotations felt like a really big difficulty spike. Like, it makes sense with the music, but it really kind of felt like it stuck out. Might be worth considering toning it down a bit, but I can understand where you're coming from. Yeah, overall, definitely file worth checking out, and I feel like I really should have ranked that higher. Next up, we got She Was. Pretty solid work here. I really like the Mind Cue double steps here. It's a nice way to accent, kind of reflect the repeating synth line there. The intro, one of my main issues is with the intro here. You have jumps on pretty much every quarter note. When you could have followed like the swing step 24th rather. I think you should. The hi-hats, like, because you followed the hi-hats with the full half-beat 24th burst here, but you didn't with the ones where it was just a single hi-hat hit leading into the quarter note. Instead, putting quarter note jumps everywhere, and I think that putting the 24th gallops would have really made it the intro more interesting. I'm not sure if I really like the 30-second stairs. When I slowed it down, it does sound like you are correct, technically, from a rhythmic standpoint, that these are 30-second bursts. But it's so quiet, and like, you know, with the gradual crescendo, having like the fastest movement in the chart following such a quiet song and sound in the song feels a little weird. 24th staircases might work better. Something worth considering. But overall, pretty solid work. Let's see. Innovationary Explosion. Not a whole lot to say about this. It's a pretty solid, you know, kind of low-end 12, I guess. You did have a rate 12, right? Yes, okay. The only things that I have for you are you missed a step right here at 60.75. And I also felt like it might be worth considering a slowdown for the section starting at measure 38. Overall, though, really solid. Looks like a fairly straightforward but fun 12. 13, I have number 13 is Signalized. A lot of interesting stuff going on here. I'm not sure I like these mines. They make sense with like kind of the popping noise. You know, kind of force a quick, abrupt with, you know, removal of your foot, but the mines are really close to those taps. It might be worth it moving them down a bit. These 12ths aren't or 24ths and slow down aren't actually 24ths. It would be more accurate, similarly to in future music, to do kind of a pseudo triplet thing, like that. Same for the other 12ths that are later in the song. Let's see. You kind of glossed over some 16th rhythms here. I felt like 38 and 38.5 could use steps, as well as 54.5, and maybe then remove this mini jack. Yeah, you kind of followed that part a little inconsistently from here to here. And then lastly, down here at 135, since these holds are kind of meant to follow the synths, like the bass synths, I think you should start a new hold right here, and then pivot off of that instead. That's all I've got though. Really interesting looking 10, lots of technical stuff going on. I liked this kind of like repeating, kind of soapy bubble-ish patterns section here. Some cool like pitch relevance with going on with the crossovers. Next up we got Blossom. Really neat chart. Good use of BPM gimmicks. Lots of good mixed rhythms. Honestly, my only issue with it is I felt like rolls are kind of being overused throughout the chart. I don't think having to tap 8th note jacks on rolls constantly is really beneficial to the chart. I understand it's to kind of try and reflect the harsher wubs going on here, but I'm just not sure it's really necessary to use them to the extent you did. But overall, really great chart. I really like the slowdowns, even though they're not explicitly marked. The use of them really makes sense, and it's easy to follow. So props for pulling that off. Not much else to say. Death's Grasp. You've got some really solid step rhetoric going on in here, but few issues. This roll at the beginning, this long-ass roll, it's pointless, and it's not fun to just mash the right arrow like that for 4 measures. You know, get rid of that, please. Let's see. The main issue with this chart is pacing. The first, like, 30-ish measures of it are really slow to start up, especially like this long 8th note roll section. Maybe following the percussion a little bit more in the intro would have helped with that, and maybe tweaking the cut a bit to cut this section down a bit if at all possible would really help. And other than that, the only other issue is that there's a minor double step here, but considering that there's a quarter note break and it's at after the end of the roll. It's pretty easy to spot. I don't think anyone's going to make the mistake of crossing over into that, but it's something that you probably want to change. Overall, though, really liked the use of 16th crossovers. Decent song choice for the later half, but the first half it feels really empty. And ultimately, that's what hurt your ranking. Next up, the Serpent's Kiss. This is the biggest issue I had here was that the audio quality on this song is so low it made nitpicking the rhythms really difficult, especially towards the end. I don't know if you ripped from YouTube or what, but whatever you did to get this audio, you might want to consider other methods or higher quality settings on your export jobs. I'm not sure what the issue is, but definitely look into it. But other than that, you've got a really solid chart here with a lot of really interesting rhythmic variants, a lot of cool patterns going on. I feel like jumps following these 16ths would have fit better with the way the instrumentation was going. So yeah, like for this entire section, jumps on these offbeat 16ths. Let's see. Down here at 146.5, I think maybe adding some 30-second notes to follow the percussion, the drum fill, might have been a good idea. Starting here at measure 42, I'm not so sure I'm a big fan of the jumps, of the long 16th stream with jumps mixed in. It's doable at this tempo. I mean, it's just 102. It's the equivalent of 204 eighth note jump stream, but I'm not sure I really like it that much. Maybe find some other, consider some other way to accent the where you had the jumps. Let's see. Beat 206 down here to beat 215, I feel like should have been a straight continuous run. The way you have it broken up just kind of feels a little weird and awkward, and I don't think really fits. And this ending run right here in particular is where the audio quality made it really hard to determine if the rhythms were really accurate. So, yeah, if you manage to get a better quality export of this song, definitely check those rhythms over. Next up, we've got Insane Techniques A, the one by 9V. My biggest issue here at this chart is that the use of 96 swing is totally inappropriate. You really should be using straight 16ths. There's no reason to be using swung notes. It's kind of a big pet peeve of mine to be throwing in unnecessary swing notes because it's not accurate with the song, and it makes, kind of makes it artificially hard to FA. Couple other minor rhythm checks. Down here, I feel like you could use a note right here on 168.5. Same goes for down here on 244.25, right there. Beat 275 right here. I feel like this hold would have been better suited as a roll. I think that would have fit better with what was going on in the song. And other than that, this crossover kind of seems to come out of nowhere for no good reason. But overall, this is a really solid 10. I mean, it got the first place vote from Psychotic, so you're obviously doing something right. But I think with a few tweaks, this chart could easily be a lot better. Double Universe is next. This is some really solid work from G-Pop. Really not much to complain about. Good use of slowdown, accurate rhythms throughout. The only question I had was I kind of felt like the total lack of steps here and replacing with minor, it just kind of felt a little jarring. I think some kind of steps to follow some of the rhythms there wouldn't have been a bad idea. But I really like this chart overall. The 16ths in the stream were a really good idea, I think, despite foot switches being hard at, kind of hard at 180. So, It was a bit of a risk you took, but I think it was a good decision ultimately. So nice job with that. Next up, I've got the Whip. This is a really interesting chart with a lot of varied rhythms, which, interestingly enough, I checked because, you know, I'm huge on nitpicking my rhythms, and these, you know, this kind of rainbowy stuff seems to be accurate and, you know, not too jarring or awkward to play at the same time. Crossover to accent the different sound, like here, was nice. You know, so that was cool. Just the song lends itself to a lot of rhythmic, variations and variety, which you definitely took really good advantage of. I felt like maybe the crossover usage was a little over the top at some points, but the tempo's slow enough that it's all doable without too much issue. But overall, really solid chart, and a really solid song choice, and really a testament to how much picking the right song can help you into making a really interesting chart. Definitely worth checking out. Next up, we have Resurrection. This is, you know, just another really solid chart that I don't have a lot to critique about. A lot of variety, a good amount of challenge and technicality. The only issue I found was that these 16ths right here should be 24ths instead, like that. Everything else seemed to check out pretty well. But yeah, really solid work from Rick and May here. Definitely worth checking out. Next up, silly video game bleep loops, which honestly, true to Mute's general fashion, I don't really have much to critique about this. Everything is stepped accurately. There avoids any substantial issues. I had a hard time hearing some of the 64th notes in here, but you know, they still work out fine. You know, overall nice, like really really enjoyable looking, fairly straightforward 10 with some interesting rhythmic stuff going on. So definitely worth checking out to anyone who's a fan of that sort of stuff. Next up, we have Masquerade. Masquerade is definitely one of the charts that took the most risks that paid off. This is a really crossover-heavy chart, which is something that a lot of people wouldn't go for. But it lends itself to some really interesting patterns. There's, for instance, several uses, at least a couple uses of crossover 30-second bursts, which, you know, most people would say you're crazy if you say those words, but I think it really flows well considering how it's set up, like right here. This pattern actually flows really well, leads itself into this crossovers really well. And it, you know, crossover usage isn't even, it isn't, despite being a crossover themed chart, it still has a good theme. For most of the chart, it really reflects, you know, changes in the rhythmic, the main rhythmic line's pitch, you know, crossovers following the higher pitches really well. Yeah, this is actually, I think, one of the most interesting files in this comp. Oh, my music cut off. What the hell? Whatever. So I think it's definitely worth looking into. The only critiques I have for this chart are down here. 154.75. You could maybe use a tap here and a tap here, because like the piano kind of has the broken up thing going on there. That's really all I have for this. So you know, good work on that. Poquito Mas, I feel, is like one of the most overlooked charts this comp. You know, at least by the other judges. And it's got a lot of really cool stuff going on. It's a really memorable chart. Really heavy jack usage, but at the low tempo of 106. It's very easy to do and, you know, not really obtrusive or obnoxious to play. And I really like down here, there's these jacks here, which are actually double as optional foot switches, which I thought was a really neat touch. Slowdowns are implemented really well. They're not marked, but the way the rhythms are and the song it goes, it's really easy to pick them out anyway. So it's, you know, good use on those. Lots of interesting 30-second note rhythms down here. I really like this stop gimmick here. It fits really well. It's, you know, and it's not over the top or, you know, difficult to learn. The only issue, honestly, with the chart is that which I think turned a lot of the judges off on the first glance, is the choice to add in unmarked foot switches at the end of the chart after a chart filled with mostly jacks. Just, you know, even though it's pretty easy to spot the foot switches, and if you don't the first time, it's easy to remember they're there. Something like just a mine, you know, to mark the foot switches might not have been a bad idea. But overall, this is a really solid chart, and I think deserves better than the overall 10th place it got. Second, I got Matia's Cave. Not a whole lot to critique. This is a really solid, varied chart with a lot of, you know, a lot of technical challenge, a lot of rhythmic variety. You know, all the good old stuff that you know everyone loves in their charts. Couple rhythm checks, maybe 66.75. Down here, I felt could maybe use a, or no, not that's 66.75 right here. I felt could have used a tap to follow the, I believe, percussion. Same for down here at 74.75, might be worth adding. And then 129.5 down here. I felt like this should have been a straight 16th note run all the way down to here if you were if it was the bass line you were trying to follow. But yeah, overall really solid, really fun looking chart with a lot of interesting stuff going on. Definitely deserves the third place finish it got. And then finally, my personal first pick is Prolux's Insane Techniques. I'm just a really big fan of the general use of crossovers to accent some of the harsher noises in here. The foot switch use here is really nice. The BPM gimmicks throughout are tastefully applied and don't really without really distracting from the chart. The only things I have are back up here at 101.25. I feel you could use a step there, you know, just like something like that. And that down at 228, right here, this roll felt kind of random. I guess you were trying to follow the kind of the gradually crescendoing sound that comes in, but it just kind of feels like it comes like this roll comes in kind of an arbitrary random point, and I think you should just maintain the hold through. But other than that, a lot of really cool stuff going on. Really like, yeah, again, really like this crossover usage to really accent those those harsh sounds in the melody. So yeah, really good job on this, and a really strong showing for, especially since this is your first comp, to my knowledge. And yeah, I believe another congratulations are in order for winning first place overall. That's all I got. If any of you have any further questions about your rankings or anything I said about your files, feel free to just ask me on R21Freak. That's all I have. I hope everyone enjoyed themselves this comp. Keep your eyes peeled. We're going to be doing double comp most likely sometime late May or early June. It's the exact same thing as this one, except with doubles charts. Everyone's encouraged to join, even if you have no experience with writing doubles charts. I'll be sure to be writing very thorough reviews, so it's a great way to get feedback on, you know, on writing doubles. So yeah, until then, thanks for submitting, and I hope to see you guys at DoubleCon.